As the DeFi space has continued down the path of exponential growth over the last several months, there are a number of important questions arising about the future of the cryptocurrency industry. In particular, crypto holders now, more than ever, are wondering which assets will stand the test of time and which will not. This begs another question. As some cryptocurrencies continue to grow, while others fade and disappear, what will happen to the industries that power their networks? Specifically, what will the future of the mining and staking industries look like? Recently, finance magnate spoke to Taras Kulyk, Senior Vice President of Blockchain Business Development at Core Scientific, a firm that provides infrastructure and software solutions for artificial intelligence and blockchain, including large scale mining operations. Taras told us about the ways that the mining space is changing as proof of stake grows in popularity, about renewable energy in the blockchain mining industry, and about the future of digital assets. I'm Rachel McIntosh, and this is FMTV. First of all, Taras, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show. Really nice to meet you.
Happy to. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So I know who you are. Can you tell a little bit about yourself and the work that you do for people who may not know who you are?
Sure. So I'm the Senior VP of Blockchain Business Development for Core Scientific. Core is really building roads and bridges, so to speak, for the AI and blockchain compute sectors. So we've got massive facilities across 3 sites in the United States, one in Calvert City, Kentucky, one in Dalton, Georgia, and one site in Marble, North Carolina. That's the site that's behind me if
I was going to
the
ask you.
viewers or listeners are able to see the video. There's Marble 1 over here, which is primarily GPU and ASIC mining, and then Marble 2, which is a containerized solution, as well as a steeple building that we've built from Greenfield. Then to the right, just a bit off the picture, there's a substation that's dedicated to our facility. Core really is positioning itself to be an enterprise player and building infrastructure for the long term. So big scale, great team, in capital intensive industry, obviously in operations, but really excited to be part of it.
Yeah, definitely. So can you talk a little bit about the decision to establish this company in the United States? So obviously there's been, mining operations in China and Canada and Iceland and all these different places that have sort of subsidized or very cheap electricity. Um, how are you managing in the United States with the cost of electricity, and does the location of these mining operations have anything to do with electricity costs?
Well, you would be surprised, but the United States actually overbuilt its power grid and infrastructure over the last 20, 30, 40 years.
Mm.
And the reason being was because of the speed of manufacturing sector growth that was anticipated to continue going. Obviously, a lot of stuff offshored, but the infrastructure that's built lasts, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so in the United States, if you get to a large enough scale and stable enough baseload of power draw, there is an opportunity here for very competitive, globally competitive rates.
Mhm.
And this is one of the main reasons for Core's focus to be scale. It's because when you're dealing with the TVAs or the Dukes, the large power utilities, the more you can come to them as a large player, very much like a metal smelter or anything else that's power intensive, they really take you seriously and they can provide you some very competitive rates, even on a global scale. While we won't get to one penny anytime soon in a regulated market, we are very competitive on our power costs. So the way Core was actually formed was through the amalgamation of several different data centers.
Mhm.
And originally it was a lot of self-hosting, but as the team actually matured and as the operations really came to fruition and we saw the line of sight onto large scale backbone services being infrastructure, hosting, provisioning, the focus is pivoted from being a self miner to really being a hosting partner to miners. We do some self mining as well, but in regards to the revenue mix, it's a small component of what we're doing. We're really trying to build up and provide white glove service for our customers so that as they scale their operations, they know that they've got a backbone infrastructure provider that they can trust and rely on for the foreseeable future.
So can you talk a little bit about what that means on a practical level that you provide hosting services for these miners?
Right. So candidly, we have two different lines of business. One being the AI high performance computing infrastructure, meaning that we have um, level three SOC 2 Type 1 certified HPC center with some top tier clients already using our AI compute. On the blockchain side, which is where my focus is we have massive facilities with access to very competitive power, and we've got technical teams and software developers and engineers essentially creating a fleet management system so that when customers' units come to core, they're plugged into stable electrical hardware in a stable environment, ensuring that their actual units are operating at an optimal rate. And
Okay.
so not only do we do the racking and stacking, so to speak, meaning taking them off the pallets and plugging them in to our hardware that we've built up, but we have a team of software developers working on optimization of firmware, working on fleet management systems optimization, meaning that if you're working on a smaller scale and you want to manage 500 or 1,000 units versus tens of thousands, which is what core is, that's the level that we're at this point.
Hmm.
Our OpEx as a percentage per unit or as a dollar per unit drops materially because the optimizations that we get from our fleet management system versus someone literally walking over and saying, "Oh, that light's red." We have a full system that's automated. Literally, that's how a lot of the places in different jurisdictions of the world operate at this point still. And the reason being is because human labor is dirt cheap, right?
Okay.
Whereas in the US, we have to benefit from economies of scale. So we need to invest in high level engineering talent, high level software developers to really optimize things so that our system essentially identifies, oh, this unit is not operating optimally. Let's do a soft reset. And there's no human interaction, right? So we're actually able to drive down the costs and increase efficiency for our own operations. That way, the only time a human actually has to go and pick up a unit is either something's failed or there's a replacement component that's required. But these things have all been identified automatically. And again, that's one of the benefits of working with Core as a client is that all of these systems are essentially automated, and you get real-time feeds through a dashboard and UI as a client.
Gotcha. So do your company's clients, I suppose they mine all kinds of cryptocurrencies. It's not just Bitcoin or
Correct.
Ethereum.
Correct. It's not just Bitcoin. We have ASICs, application-specific integrated circuit mining, for SHA-256, but we also have GPUs, general performance units, that are mining, plethora of different cryptocurrency. Ethereum being a big component of that mining, but there's Zcash and LTC and all bunch of other ones as well.
Yeah, so many of them. So I wanted
Yeah, and we've got a couple initiatives coming up that we'll be announcing soon, specifically around being an infrastructure provider to protocol teams so that if somebody wants to spin up a master node, they don't need to go buy 10, 20, $30,000 worth of server equipment. They can contact Core and we can be their infrastructure partner. And again, that's the key that Core is really trying to provide to the industry and unlock a value for people is that you don't need to buy the hardware. You can look at Core to be that hardware provider and really you manage the services and the actual exposure to the underlying volatility of the asset itself.
Right. So are your customers mostly, mining pools and those kinds of entities? Are they other kinds of companies? Are they individuals? What does that really look like?
It's a mix. It's a mixed bag. We have individuals, we have public companies, we have institutional investors, high net worth investors, and so we're seeing a lot fewer individuals and more LP structures, so limited partnership structures,
Mhm.
where a group of individuals or entities or investment funds want to gain exposure to the industry and they want a reliable partner that's not going to have their facilities get shut down or melt because of heat or
Right.
get sued because of all sorts of corporate structure issues. We're a stable platform, Ernst& and Young audited, second year pass with flying colors. Like we really want to be that enterprise infrastructure provider for the space.
We want to be legit.
We are legit. That's
You
the
are
thing.
legit. Yeah.
If you look at our C-suite, I mean, you really can't beat it. I mean, Kevin Turner with his background, at CEO of Microsoft, reporting directly to Ballmer and Gates. I mean, really, with that kind of reputation and credibility, you really can't beat what Core is doing in the market, and we're
So,
growing fast.
yeah, so you asked me before we started this interview how I got into crypto. So how did you and this gate of C-suite excuse me, this group of C-suite executives.
It's
Wow.
early still.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, I got into crypto after grad school. I did my JD MBA in Toronto. I did 3 years of investment banking, 1 year covering traditional metals and mining, so gold, PGM, copper, iron ore.
Okay.
And then really, I had a tech bug. I mean, out of undergrad, I worked for a VC and spent a couple of years working for early stage tech companies in Toronto.
Mhm.
And traditional mining is fantastic. Gold is great. But to me, tech was really what was interesting. And so I did 2 years of tech coverage and investment banking in Toronto as well. And then realized I wanted to get more exposure on the operations side, decided not to stay in investment banking. And my first role within crypto was for the Jax Hot Wallet.
Mhm.
So Decentral out of Toronto, founded by Anthony Diorio. Really the job there was bringing on new tokens and coins to be listed on the hot wallet.
Right.
And then as these things go, I got an opportunity to work for a large private family office out of the in the Caribbean.
Mhm.
And there, I built probably what was at that point the largest privately owned crypto mining fleet on the planet. We went from 9,000 units to over 300,000 units. I did almost 300,000 kilometers of travel in 2018, visiting different facilities all around the world: China, Kazakhstan, Taiwan, South Korea. I mean, um, yeah, pretty pretty interesting
Well,
places.
yeah, definitely.
Um, yeah, and then as these things happen, I ended up being CEO of a public company, um, and then had some garden leave. And once garden leave was up, Core came knocking, and an offer was something that I was very interested in. I'd worked with Core as a client before, knew the team, saw what they were doing, and really aligned with the enterprise scope of Core, its mission, and its mandate. Um, and that got me really excited. Working with Kevin is intense, but I mean the guy knows his stuff, and
Mhm.
with that kind of leadership behind, it's going to be the enterprise player for North America for crypto mining, digital assets, as well as AI compute. Um, so that's really the path to how I got here.
Yeah, that's the long and short of it. So I'm curious, I want to talk to you about growth.
Sure.
Um, when did you join this company?
June, in June.
In June of this year. So I'm curious if you can speak a little bit about what you've seen in terms of the ways that people are interacting with the cryptocurrency mining space. This is a big year for a lot of different reasons for
Yeah, huge
crypto.
year.
Yeah,
Huge.
we had the Bitcoin halving, as well as, the fallout from the coronavirus and the following recovery. How have these, fluctuations in the cryptocurrency markets and things like the halving, how has that influenced your business and the mining space as a whole?
Yeah, great question. I mean, 2020, I think people look back as the year that people realized that digital assets are not going anywhere.
Mm,
That the flash in the pan that a lot of folks were calling crypto or digital assets is not necessarily the reality, that it
right.
really is becoming an integrated component to the financial system. Um, the biggest announcement, I think, from a North American policy perspective was really the OCC letter
Mhm.
designating crypto or digital assets to be monetary instruments versus purely commodities, and allowing national or federally regulated banks to interact and do business using them.
Right.
That change, I think, caused a massive run up within 48 hours of the announcement in the price of BTC, which is really the bellwether of the industry.
Mhm.
But it also probably opened a lot of eyes to the fact that this really is going to be integrated into the financial system.
Mhm.
When it's no longer, trust companies and custodians only with specific designations holding crypto, but now your bank you can go to like your Wells Fargo or Bank of America once they decide to go into this line of business, and they can actually transact for you. that level of obscurity that people were talking about before with crypto is no longer there. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a recurring theme across the articles I've been writing and discussions I've been having that digital assets really are coming out of the basement and into the boardroom. And
Mm,
so with Core, the way we're positioning, the reason we're being audited by Ernst and Young is that we really are going to be that player going into the boardroom. And what we've seen in the market um, is that there's a ton of interest from larger institutional players.
hmm.
I mean, this morning, Foundry Digital announced that they're going to be providing financing to Bitmain customers. Um, there was a recent filing by Fidelity that they're actually launching a brand new fund. They haven't disclosed, or I haven't seen the actual numbers, but I'm sure it'll be hundreds of millions of dollars
Oh yeah.
dedicated. Anchorage has been raising capital like crazy. Um, who else? Barry Silbert, DCG guys.
Hmm.
Um, I forget. Uh, the folks
That's
behind DCG, Galaxy Digital, they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars.
absolutely.
Um, and there's one other hedge fund I forget, but they've raised over $1.5 billion in the past
Hmm.
like 6 months, and so they're almost at $5 billion on assets under management with a focus on the crypto asset space.
Yeah.
While they seem like big numbers in the general financial scheme, that's still a drop in the bucket. Well, within finance, things grow pretty quickly once the wedge is in, right? And so there was an interesting report that I highlighted to the management team at Core that in the past 2 months, $90 billion of assets under management funds have disclosed that they now, for the first time, have crypto or digital assets within their portfolio holdings. Not a lot. I mean, it's still like 30, $40 million, which is, again, a small percentage. But now that they've made the decision, their investment committees have made the decision to gain the exposure, that's all you need.
Hmm.
That exposure and that ability to say, yes, that's now part of our portfolio and assets under management, that will only grow.
So do you have any thoughts on what the timeline for this kind of thing is going to be? As you mentioned that things kind of happen quickly, but and now we've had this OCC decision where banks are technically allowed to provide some services, regarding digital assets. When will I be able to go to Bank of America and say, I'd like to buy a Bitcoin, or here are my Bitcoins, let me deposit
Yeah, no, I would still say on that full integration will probably be 3 to 5 years. I mean,
5 years? Yeah.
you look at the early 2000s, and I would give a lot of comparisons between the integration of web into
Mhm.
full industry and how long it took you to be able to transact using a browser for bank needs from when they were first available, right? I mean, pets.com, that pop. There will be a ton of bankruptcies and foreclosures within the crypto space, but the leaders that stay will really become either assets to be acquired by the majors
Yeah.
or become majors in their own right.
Right.
Right. So I'd say 3 to 5 years before true full financial system integration, but the seeds are already planted. I mean, you've got U.S. Congress looking into the
Hmm.
impacts of being able to support crypto and digital mining within North America. I read somewhere, I haven't validated yet, but the government of Kazakhstan's invested 750 million to support digital mining within Kazakhstan. I mean, the U.S. and Canada, they can't ignore this. I mean, if BTC and digital assets will become monetary instruments, there needs to be political support behind it so that we're not beholden to, ex-Soviet states or Russia or China to control and stabilize and secure the network that we're relying to for financial service transactions.
Right. Right. So I want to ask you also about this sort of dichotomy that's forming in the cryptocurrency space between uh, networks that are powered by proof of work, which employs mining, and then this growing DeFi sector, which seems to have a much larger emphasis on proof of stake algorithms, which doesn't involve mining. Is that something that your business is sort of looking to address? Are you considering providing staking services, or what is your position on that?
Well, I mentioned earlier that we are looking at being a vendor of choice
Mhm.
for master nodes.
Right, right,
And
right.
so we will be announcing some protocols that we're working with very shortly, specifically for that, for proof
Okay.
of stake mining and all the derivatives of that. I'd be very careful around what's going on with DeFi. I mean, I
Tell
was
me
in
more.
crypto
Tell
and
me more.
I was around in crypto in 2017 during the ICO craze.
Right.
And so with the regulations hardening up around raising capital, um, a lot of these projects that essentially are doing unregulated capital raises need to be very careful,
Yeah.
especially where they're getting money from. And if they're not doing it in a proper way, then there will be a lot of prosecution, as has gone on since the 2017 ICO days.
Yeah.
Um, the discussion around proof of work versus proof of stake. I think they each have their own merits, benefits, and obviously drawbacks. I mean, one of the big drawbacks of proof of work is it's capital intensive. The amount of energy that's required to secure the BTC network right now, people claim to be massive, but if you actually look at the amount of power used in just the light bulbs of every bank within the US,
Good
I mean,
comparison. Yeah.
but that's not even including the HVAC systems. I mean, there's candidly proof of work, I think, has shown that it is a very stable method of securing a blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't think that proof of work will ever disappear at this point based on the resilience that it's shown across the BTC network at this point. There's a ton of different projects out there that are doing their own derivations of BTC. I mean, I'm not going to name them, but they are out there. And candidly, I mean, the market will dictate who the winner of the great race will be. I mean, there's I think 7,000 different coins listed
So
on
many. Mhm.
Coin Market Cap or CoinGecko, and so there's a ton of stuff out there. And discerning investors really need to be aware of what to expose themselves to from a capital risk perspective. And I think that the top 10, top 20 um, probably will be there for the long haul,
Mhm.
aside from maybe some of these DeFi coins that are extremely,
Exploding
extremely
right now.
volatile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. But I want to touch back on what you said, regarding this thing about energy consumption. I mean, that's something that's talked about a lot um, in the cryptocurrency space. It's just like the sheer, the environmental impact of Bitcoin. But I really like that you brought up the fact that, the traditional banking system as it stands, currently probably uses a lot more energy. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, well, the existing financial system, there's huge amounts of infrastructure, buildings and facilities, HVAC, servers. I mean, there's been research reports that show that BTC, even as it is now and for the foreseeable future, won't be even close to that power draw. And so one of the things that Core really prides itself on as well is that we really do have a fairly strong renewable power mix for
Okay.
our use of power. I mean, we plug into TVA Duke and I believe Southern, and this facility I believe is powered almost primarily from hydro with some wind and a bit of nuclear, I believe, as well. But there's a lot of emphasis on the renewable power scene within digital mining. I'm on the phone with parties that essentially are looking at stranded renewable assets and turning them into useful power sources for digital mining.
Mm.
Because when you've got a wind farm that doesn't necessarily have the use that's been subsidized to build it, but there isn't like a local manufacturing facility, you can actually plug in a containerized solution and get that humming to create value in securing the blockchain network as well.
Okay, so I want to ask you this question, and this is maybe something that's not typically something that Core deals with, but there are there's still quite a lot of interest, just as there is in the DeFi space with yield farming and all of these different practices that people are using to gain value from their cryptocurrencies on the proof of stake side of things. How could you speak a little bit about how sort of the average person who might be interested in earning a little bit of extra cash from mining, is that sort of possible at this point in time, or has that ship sailed?
No, it is possible. I mean, there's cloud mining services that you can essentially subscribe to.
Hmm.
I know that there's going to be a few announcements in the near term around that space, with large players investing. Core may have an announcement coming up as well around that,
Ooh,
as
okay.
where we provide the infrastructure for these operations. Um, in regards to a retail investor looking to park their crypto, I'd be very I would recommend that they do their due diligence and homework on the operation or company that they decide to work with. Make sure you're able to find the officers and directors on LinkedIn.
Right.
Their website doesn't have spelling mistakes. Um, yeah, I mean, really, due diligence is absolutely crucial. There are some DeFi lenders out there that are reputable. I mean, I can say BlockFi and Celsius, they're doing really good things. But again, you can find their officers online. They're reputable. They're credible. You can see the previous projects that they've worked on. And I guess that's really what I'd recommend to retail investors. Do your homework. Make sure the team that you're investing in is a team that you can stand behind. And if anyone were to ever put it up on the front page of a newspaper, you can say, yeah, I invested with those people.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
just like you would with a bank, like you're not
Right.
going to go
Right.
to that shady guy in the corner of the strip mall and ask to borrow, a couple grand or lend him $100 or $200 of your money, right? You want a credible professional team. And again, that's why I think it's really important for what happened with the OCC is that the federally regulated banks will be in this space soon. And so again, within the next 3 to 5 years, I'd say that you probably will be able to do this type of investing or yield farming, so to speak, through regulated financial institutions.
Absolutely. So, Terrace, I want to thank you so much for your time. Before we end this interview, any announcements, or can you also share where our listeners might be able to find out more about your company?
Yeah, I'd recommend if you're interested about Core, go to corescientific.com, check us out on LinkedIn, or check out our Twitter feed. There's going to be a lot of announcements coming up in Q4. It is going to be very interesting with the stuff that we're involved in and we're really launching. So hope to be in contact, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you for the opportunity for this podcast.
Yeah, happy to, Terrace. Absolutely.